Hi, Mr. Teschner. We are honored to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Robert Cujo Teschner is a combat veteran and retired Air Force pilot. He is a former F-15 and F-22 fighter pilot, as well as a former F-15 fighter weapons or Top Gun school instructor and operational F-22 squadron commander. Mr. Teschner took what he learned from the Air Force and wrote two best-selling books, one being Debrief To Win, and now we, HPC International, have the honor of selling his book, as well as having the privilege of booking Cujo for one of his inspiring lectures. So we're very excited to have you here today. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much to the entire team for collaborating with us and bringing what I think is a really, really important message of teamwork and accountability into the healthcare space. I think it's brilliant, and I salute you.
So let's get started. Cujo, what inspired you to write your story?
Great question. I think I'd take you back to 2004 when I was a young instructor at the Air Force Weapons Instructor course, formerly the Fighter Weapons School for the Air Force. And I'm sitting there. I got assigned the responsibility of building the Team of Teams accountability course. So I was going to be the person that was teaching accountability to the essentially to the top practitioners in the Air Force who would go back and bring this to their various tribes. And I'm working on this syllabus, and a dear friend of mine comes to me and complains about the absence of accountability on her management team. So they've had a leadership transition. As a consequence of the leadership transition, there's pockets of accountability. There's an uneven distribution of accountability. If you're on the A team, you're good to go. Don't even have to do your job. If you're not on the A team, it's a totally different story. And she shared her intense frustration with this. And I remember thinking in that moment, what it is that I'm about to teach to the Air Force is applicable everywhere. It's not just something that we need in the domain of combat aviation. This is something that we need everywhere, because if accountability isn't practiced well, if we have an uneven distribution of accountability, we've got an unjust culture. And if we have an unjust culture, then we lose trust, we lose buy-in, commitment, we lose performance, and everything kind of crumbles from the inside. It's a rotten core. And so that was where the idea came into play. Fast forward a decade after that conversation, I'll be diagnosed with colorectal cancer, and I'll be forced to leave the job that I loved doing. I can't be a fighter pilot any longer because I'm missing now most of my lower colon. I'm lucky to be alive. And I found that I couldn't do any of the jobs that I was, used to doing, flying airplanes, leading people. I was trapped in a bathroom. Low anterior resection syndrome is the name of what it was that I suffered from really egregiously back then. And so in the hunt for, what do you do, ended up joining a couple of small businesses, found that both of those were lacking in terms of accountability and teamwork. So what do I know? What can I still do in the world to do good? And realized that a fighter pilot is a teacher first and always. What it was that I was privileged to learn over the course of my 2-decade Air Force career was teamwork, leadership centered around the practice of positive, forward-focused accountability. And I made it my life's mission to go out there and teach this. And here we are.
Yeah, it's like you got to figure something else out, and that's absolutely a great direction to go in.
That's right. Yep.
So it's very popular right now, the Top Gun franchise. How do you feel about that franchise, and how accurate is it to every day what you that you do or
Yeah,
did?
great. I love it. We are in a Top Gun world, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, what do I think about the Top Gun franchise? I love it. I saw the original Top Gun movie when it came out in '86. I saw it with a bunch of fighter pilots at Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany, Air Force fighter pilots, I might add. And we're at the base theater, and I'm watching this movie. And at the end of the movie, the entire theater erupts in a roar. I mean, everybody was on their feet, hooting and hollering. They just loved it. And being a kid at that time, in the midst of fighter pilots who were going, yes, reinforced in my mind what I'd already thought was the case. I need to be one of these people. I've wanted to be a fighter pilot since I saw Star Wars in '77. Top Gun reinforced it, and that was great. The new one came out. I was very, very worried about it felt that Top Gun was such a special thing, didn't want it to be ruined. Danger with a sequel that comes out decades after the original is that it's not going to live up to par, pass muster, be as good as, reinforce what we loved about the original one. And what I can share with you in confidence is I've watched it 4 times, and every time it makes me emotional. And I think the second one is better than the first in many ways. And I'm so glad that they made it. Now, to its accuracy, I don't care. Like, frankly, it doesn't matter whether it's accurate. And the reason why I say that is that there's too much going on up there. It's happening in 3 dimensions. It's really difficult to try to capture any of that in a 2-dimensional, screen and bring people in appropriately. So it's never bothered me, the inaccuracies. In fact, I would applaud the crews in both cases for finding a way to capture the essence of what's taking place in a way that America and the world has responded to so well. So I applaud them. I'm one of those who says nicely done. And I was so happy to take my kids to go see Top Gun Maverick and have them experience what I experienced when I was a kid. And we've got 2 young members of our tribe. We've got 5 kids in total, 2 that have both affirmed that they want to potentially become fighter pilots themselves now. So nicely done, Jerry Bruckheimer. Nice job, Tom Cruise and the Maverick Top Gun Maverick team.
That's amazing that you're able to share that with your children like that. I
Really
remember in the
special.
80s seeing that original one and then the newest one, and I just absolutely love it. So let's see, how did your experience in the Air Force change your life?
Yeah, in so many great ways. For one, it taught me that there's tremendous value in being part of something that's bigger than you are. And there's even more value in learning to subordinate your interest to that of the team. And I saw that. I experienced it. My father was in the Air Force. He was a judge advocate general, so he was an attorney. His eyesight was bad. He wanted to fly, but he couldn't. But I was around that environment growing up, and I really felt like it was my family. And when my father retired, I felt like we were losing part of our family. And it really was disappointing. Even though he was going to be around more, I was disappointed that we were losing our Air Force family. And in that moment, I announced to everybody, when he announced his retirement, I said, well, that's it. I for sure have to carry this thing forward. And I think my brothers felt that way as well. Both my brother Anthony and my brother John, they both served. Anthony in the Navy, my brother John in the Army, kind of, charting their own paths there. But the other thing that was very, very practical that I took away, one of the things that was so wonderful about being part of fighter squadrons, was that I learned really the essence of leadership and teamwork. I lived it. I benefited from it. And then once I realized that there is no divide, like a team is a team is a team, and the principles that apply to one team apply to all teams. That's where we took this. We were able to extract from the background and do good with this in other domains. So I owe everything to my time in the Air Force. My best friends come from my time there. The life experiences that I had, flying over the pyramids in Egypt, or flying over the cradle of civilization, or crossing the Pacific Ocean, bisecting Iwo Jima, thinking about history that way. I mean, those are things you just can't ever duplicate anywhere else. But the learning of being part of something that's bigger than you are, subordinating your interests and making that of the team the most important, the ones that you're focused on constantly, and then teamwork and leadership. I mean, I couldn't have had a better education in how to hopefully build a strong family team and to be able to teach principles because of that experience.
Yeah, it's like if you don't have the experience, you have no idea.
Right.
It
Right.
help
It's
you
all
grow in
theory.
every way.
That's right.
And then to be with an amazing team, and that makes all the difference.
It absolutely does.
So what is the main takeaway that you would like readers to have from reading your book?
Yeah. Accountability has been weaponized. All right. And if I were to summarize very quickly my experience, accountability is weaponized. But when we talk about accountability, typically it's in the context of we have to hold somebody to account for this particular failure. And so the outcome of accountability is going to be punishment. Like, even if it's not doing 700 push-ups, or, you know, having to lug something from here to there, just the fact that somebody's going to identify you as being the root cause of why it was that we didn't succeed, that comes across as public blaming, public shaming, and that doesn't necessarily serve us well. There's a time and a place for everything. Leadership is situational, but I think the big takeaway that I want readers to come away with is that accountability is actually a tremendous opportunity, when harnessed correctly from a high performance team standpoint, to help the team to learn. And one of the beautiful things that I take away from my Air Force experience is, in the high performance teams that I served on, our accountability methodology was actually the way that we coached each other up. It was our resilience strategy for how it was that we rebounded from a failure. It was our mechanism to help the team to constantly learn, hopefully improve, so that the next iteration would be better. But when we're trying to account for the fact that on our teams, we're losing people on such a frequent basis, because the Air Force only allows you typically to spend 3 years at the most at any one assignment as a fighter pilot. So you're bringing in people constantly fresh out of training, no experience. How do you maintain a consistently high standard in the midst of all of that? And the simple answer is, you've got to teach, coach, mentor, help people to learn effectively. And that's the way that we've harnessed accountability. And and I suppose the follow on to that is that if you can too, you being whoever it is that's reading the book, well, then there's only upside to that. And it's tremendous upside to that.
Very much so. You can't learn from your mistakes, then you're never gonna grow.
That's
You're never
right.
gonna get anywhere.
And the other piece of this is, I'm stunned by how infrequently we hold ourselves to account for our successes. And in so doing, we don't acknowledge the good things that people are doing to help us along the way. And when we're so outcome focused, and it's only about correcting the mistakes, ultimately what we're turning our teams into is like robot organizations, where everybody, you know, does what they're supposed to do in accordance with how they're supposed to do it. If they're not, they're corrected to get back into, and that's not a place where we thrive. Far from that. I don't think anybody thrives in that kind of an environment. So another thing that I could add to what would you suggest that somebody takes away from this is, military high performance teams are stunningly human. And in their stunning humanity, we're very conscientious to recognize people for the good that they're doing, not some of the time, but all of the time. And what we find is, by celebrating the good that people are doing, they want to do good again and again and again. We're sending a message to the team that around here, we recognize when people do things correctly. And instead of talking about failure from the standpoint of how much we suck as a team, for example, we say, you did this right, you did this right, you did this right, you did this right. Yeah, this is the area that you got wrong today. And I suspect that now that we've dug into this thing and we understand why it was that we missed the mark on this thing, that tomorrow you can do this plus some more things. Like, tomorrow is going to be a clear win. You ready to win with me? Are we as a team ready to win? I mean, that's a totally different way to address team dynamics, but I think it's the right way, especially in the sea of never-ending disruptions that we're dealing with, especially in the midst of what the CEO of Gallup says is a global rise of unhappiness in the world. I think speaking to the human soul in a way that reinforces the good that's taking place is mission critical right now.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Everybody always focuses on the negative, it seems like, and there's so much positivity everywhere. And like you said, people just don't get recognized for that. And there needs to be a lot more of that to be able to move as a whole. And every single person is human, and every single person makes mistakes. And we shouldn't have to just always focus on the mistakes constantly, because you learn from those mistakes, and then that's a positive thing. So that is a very good point.
A benefit of growing up in that kind of an environment. And remember this, and I think for your audience especially, it's very important that we realize fighter aviation, we're talking about high reliability operation. We're talking about a high consequence operation. Like, we cannot afford to drop a bomb on the wrong target. We cannot afford to shoot down a friendly. in the world that I come from, that has geopolitical significance. The people that get involved in those kinds of bad outcomes include the White House. So I empathize with the high reliability, high consequence organizations that you're speaking to on a regular basis because I've lived it. Then the question really comes down to, how do you properly navigate that and build the bonds of trust while learning to not make egregious mistakes? I think a fighter squadron can open the door to some outstanding approaches that benefit everybody and nurture the team along, building the bonds of trust while we explore how we're never going to make the same mistake again.
Right, yeah, they're trying to benefit everybody, not just a single person.
That's right.
So then, with that being said, what is the single piece of advice that you would give to any leader?
Yeah, maybe it's this: go watch 12 O'Clock High. And the reason that I say that is that leadership is situational. We cannot just lead the same way everywhere. We cannot lead everybody the exact same way. Everybody's different. In order to be the best leader, we have to constantly step up our leadership game and adjust our style so that it's appropriate for the now. There's a time to be hard. There's a time to be empathetic. If I had to gravitate or outline where it is that I'd choose to spend most of my time, it would be in empathy land, frankly, understanding the context within which people make the decisions they do to help nurture them along to make increasingly better decisions. But if we're just a certain way all the time, I don't know that meets the need. And specifically right now, I would say is the hardest time in our collective lifetimes to be called to lead anything. There are so many shifts. There's so many changes. The world around us, it's so turbulent right now. We're seeing a mass exodus out of the workspace. We're seeing a tremendous rift, specifically in the United States. We're on two sides of an epic divide right now, where the other side, whatever that is wrong. And I have zero inclination to understand why they might think the way that they do. If you're not with me or against me, kind of a thing, which is a bad place for us to be as a society. But knowing that that's an undercurrent within the work domain requires us to up the leadership game. And an additional burden that leaders have placed on them right now is our teammates are looking to us for hope and a better tomorrow, even as it seems like the news is getting constantly worse and somebody else's fault for it. So it's a tough time to be called to lead. And I think we have to be very conscientious of that. Leaders need to recognize that situational leadership is more important now than ever before. And we've got to learn to be extremely positive in the messages that we send, extremely positive in how it is that we discuss with our teammates opportunities for growth and learning. And that's tough for some of us who may have been raised differently from that. And yet we have to ask ourselves, what's the most effective way to lead? Is it to repeat potentially mistakes of the past, or is it to up our collective game to meet the demands that our teammates have of us in the now? That would be my long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, every single person is different, and every single person that you're trying to lead is different and takes things differently no matter what it is. And you can't just do it one way for everybody to get the message across. It's never going to happen. So, what value do you think that you could bring to the healthcare sector? Because it's completely different from the Air Force.
Yeah, here's what's beautiful about teams. All teams are the same. The principles that make a team, they're all the same. The principles that make a high performance team a high performing team are also the same. So if we don't worry about what industry we're talking about and we just focus on the team aspect that exists across all industries, we'll find that the principles remain the same. And so as soon as we come to grips with that, we are good to go. But then I would say there's so much that's similar between flying organizations and healthcare, and we recognize this. I mean, and forgive me for potentially butchering his name, but Atul Gawan's checklist manifesto takes from the aviation world the power and utility of checklists and brings that into the healthcare space, because in a high reliability, high consequence world, checklists can be a huge boost to performance. The same thing that I lived. Cross-tell. I mean, we've got team steps, I think it's called, and an adaptation of the Navy's crew resource management, which is coming from United Flight 173, a horrific disaster in December of 1978 that fundamentally changes the construct, the dynamics in the cockpit. We learn from a horrible mistake how to change the culture in the cockpit to where everybody has a voice, where the captain is no longer seen as the all-knowing, omniscient being that everybody has to defer to in order to improve safety. That makes its way across commercial aviation. It makes its way into military aviation, makes its way into the healthcare space. So many overlapping capabilities. And so what I really would come down to is this. Since you have teams, since we have teams, since we understand how to team really well, then it would make sense that we would cross-apply the principles that allow us to team really well into healthcare, because that's where we desperately need to perform at our best. And I, as a frequent customer, unfortunately, of the healthcare space, as a colorectal cancer survivor, I really care that we've got strong teams out there at the team of teams level executing to accomplish mission success. So I'm bought in on bringing these principles into the healthcare space because I know that I'll benefit from it as well.
Absolutely. You want the best of the best helping you when you have any type of medical need. So, who is Debrief to Win written for, or who would benefit the most from reading it?
Yeah, it's written for team leaders and teammates in any domain. And that includes in the family space. And I would say that because I think the family team is the most important team that any of us is privileged to be on. My wife, who is an accountant by trade, when she read the original manuscript for Debrief to Win, she had two reflections for me. She's the only person on the planet that I trusted to give me honest feedback about the original manuscript. And after she read it, she said two things. One, I understand what you've been ranting about all these years now. And two, why don't we do this at home? And I'm a slow learner in certain areas. Until she said that, it actually hadn't crossed my mind to cross-apply the teamwork principles that I was teaching in the Air Force in the home environment. And yet it just makes sense. If a team is a team is a team, why wouldn't we? And as a result of the cancer journey, we got an opportunity to focus on the family team. And what we found is by adopting the principles that I've been teaching in the Air Force, we become a tighter, better team. And so therefore, I say any place that you have a team, this book is for you. If you're a leader of a team, this book is for you. If you're a member of a team, this book is for you. If you care to grow a stronger team, this book is for you. That's who it was written for. And what I'm hearing from people across the planet is that it's making an impact. And I get constant feedback about this book from across the planet, which is incredibly encouraging.
It absolutely is. I would agree. I actually read your book. It took me a day to read it. I was very intrigued by it. It was very good and very moving, very inspirational. And I took from it the very first day was I need to practice what I preach at home with my family team. And I am not kidding when I say that I am using your principles at home with my family team. And so it is for everybody.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. You just made my day.
Well, it's true. So you do your leadership workshops. Um, who would benefit the most from one of your workshops?
Yeah, I'll tell you again, the answer is what we're talking about applies throughout the organization. So then how does it typically look? When we come in, typically we'll do a workshop for the leadership. So whether it's the executive leadership team by itself or whether it's the executive leadership team and then a rung down, that's a typical entry point. Which then oftentimes leads to, hey, can we just talk to the entire organization? In which case we just have to work out the logistics. We try to not have more than about 50 people in a session at a time so that we can have interaction where people can have the space to ask their questions while we're going through our foundations training. But I would advocate for the further throughout the organization that we can learn to practice accountability the right way, the more the entire organization benefits, because accountability is the nuclear core of a well-run team, and we've got teams throughout the organization, and we all ought to be singing off the same sheet of music, using the same core team life cycles. And so we'll start at the top and then make our way through in order for the entire organization to benefit.
Absolutely. Got to start somewhere.
That's right.
How can people sign up for your workshop?
um, I'd say the easy way would be through you. Following up through you, we've got a great exchange, and we'll take it from there. If you do reach out to us directly at vmaxgroupllc.com, please, in that outreach, let us know that this is a consequence of having seen this webinar. Understand that we're coming together by way of this webinar. That's going to be important for us. But I would recommend through your outstanding organization, frankly.
Well, I don't want to. I know you're a very, very busy man, and I don't want to keep you all day. So for now, I say thank you so much for your time today, Cujo. It's a pleasure meeting you and speaking with you. I've learned a lot about just the Air Force in your book that I did not know before, and the concepts that you have in your book, I've learned a lot from, and I love books like that. Doesn't always happen every day. I encourage everybody to get a copy and read it. And of course, everybody, you can always get your copy of Debrief to Win through HPC International, and you can always book Cujo for a leadership workshop through us as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for taking the time to read, and for sharing, and for being part of this today. All of this certainly warms the heart and justifies what it is that we're doing. And I'll end on this note. Our purpose here with our company at VMAX Group is to teach and inspire real teamwork, so that teams learn to thrive in the midst of never-ending disruption. There's so much good that comes from that, and ultimately, HPC International is helping advance that purpose, which I think is something to be celebrated. So thank you for that.